Today we're going to talk with Sumiye, who is the present-day librarian at the Nipigon Library. And Sumiye has lots of information on past libraries and how we ended up with this library here. So Sumiye, maybe give us a little bit of your background and how you came to be the librarian.
Well, I'm originally from Jellicoe, and I had moved to town, and I was a heavy library user in Thunder Bay, which I'd been at before I came here. I had joined the board, and then the position came up. I was working in Thunder Bay at the time, so I was looking forward to a job which did not involve any, travel, more time at home. So I applied for the job, took a leave of absence from the board, and luckily enough got hired. I do have a library tech. I had done the training. I have the diploma in that. I've also taken other courses over the years. So I started there in 1999 at the library, which was formerly on 3rd Street. So just around the corner from this current library we're in. And it was originally a Bell station, and then it was a Chinese food restaurant. So it wasn't actually designed as a library. It was built long, skinny, not terribly well for stacks. And when I moved into it, it was interesting because they'd never had a strategic plan. We weren't automated, and the computers were just coming into the library. We had just got our first public computers through the Community Access Program. Tracy Laird was the librarian before me, and she had applied for funding for that. We got lots of funding, which was great, but it was something to work into. So when I got there, we had desks coming in, we had computers coming in, and there was a lot of changes going on for people.
I think I remember your volunteers putting shelving together even.
Yes.
In there, you had lots of various types of shelving.
So we had a meeting room in the back that we were using for board meetings at the time. And like I said, long and skinny means that you don't have a lot of space for programming, and your stacks are hard to rearrange. So in order to get more books in, people were asking at the time for fantasy, science fiction. We put that into the back room. I also tried putting the large prints back there for people. And we have a collection currently of about 15,000 items, which not too bad. We normally have circulation of physical items of about 10,000 per year, and we have about 9,000 to 10,000 people a year coming through the door. Yes, a lot of those are repeat customers, which is perfect. We need the repeat business.
How do you keep count, Sumiye?
We actually keep track manually. We did have a door counter on the door. However, door counters aren't very accurate when people go in and out to use the bathroom or in and out to run to the pharmacy. You get double counts. Some people thought it was fun to run in and out and make the counter turn over. So a manual count is a lot more accurate. We're still missing people. We forget some days to count. I've had some days where we know we were busy. We've had nobody in according to our manual stats. However, 9,000 to 10,000 on average per year. And like I said, circulation of about 12,000 sometimes. We've had highs of 15,000 for circulation, which with a collection of 15,000 was pretty good. Budget's around 100,000. So we're doing fairly well for what we have. When I started at the library, we had a very small DVD collection. DVDs were just coming into our library. We had about 3 feet of DVDs times 2, so maybe 6 feet total. Our audiovisual budget has moved very little since then. I started 20 years ago, and our audiovisual budget is still at about $500 to $600 a year, which does not allow you to buy very much. So we happily take donations, and people can donate out of the generosity of their heart, or some people can donate in lieu of fines. So our collection now is about 2,000 for the audiovisual DVDs. And it's thanks to awesome donors that we have collections like NCIS, Game of Thrones, Midsummer Murders. Those have all been donated from people. So great patrons, great community support, and a lot of people who donate to the library don't actually use the library a lot.
So I'm surprised that so many people still watch them, Sumiye.
Even with Netflix now, we're still seeing heavy use. There's still a lot of people in town who cannot afford to purchase Wi-Fi, which you require for the internet, for your Netflix. So there's a lot of people in town using them. We still have a few thousand DVDs going out every year, which is good circulation.
Right.
Blu-rays, not so much. We only have about, I'd say, 6 feet of Blu-rays, so not a lot of those. If you think of the average cost of, I've bought the last Game of Thrones, it's on order. So you think of the average cost of that and a budget of about $500, and that includes children's, adults, audiobooks, as well as DVDs. That doesn't get you very far.
Right. So you don't have the old, I can't remember,
VHS?
VHS ones?
We've eliminated the VHS.
Oh.
I actually preferred them because they tended not to get scratched and we didn't go through them as much. But because we are getting a lot of donations from patrons, we don't really need to worry about the pricing as much. And because they're mostly donated, we don't actually have a lot of non-returned DVDs or stolen ones. People tend not to steal what they've donated or their friends have donated.
Right.
So it's a win-win in that way. And a lot of times they'll donate duplicates, which we can replace. So our stacks haven't really changed. In the new library we moved in, when I got hired, like I said, we had no strategic plan. We had no letterhead. We had no logo. So I got hired and I had 3 goals when I started. Automation, a strategic plan, and a logo, something that we had identifiable as library. So if somebody came in who was a tourist, didn't know the person working, they could look, we have a vest on, it's got the library logo, we've got a name tag. Not that anybody can pronounce it, but it does help. People feel more welcomed, more at home. So I got hired. We're working on our 3rd strategic plan at the moment, so just starting it. We've also had a logo since then, and we moved into a new building. Thanks in part to funding, the municipality supported us at that time heavily and applied for the funding, so we were able to move into a new building. This was a community effort in more than one way. We had volunteers who used wheelbarrows to help us move the books across the road. We had volunteers building the shelving. They quoted me $5,000 to have the shelving assembled, so we had volunteers put it together. It was just a great community effort on that, and we had people who donated. For $50, you got your name put on a shelf, and we've got names throughout that paid for all the new shelving we have. So it's been a community effort all along.
I do remember, of course, that the library on 2nd Street was a centennial project.
Yes, 1967.
Right,
they got
that's where
funding.
we got the funding for that library.
So the library started in 1958, December 16th, I believe it was. The municipality struck a bylaw establishing the library, and it started in the basement of Thompson's store. So we've gone through, I believe I'm about the 11th librarian that's worked here. We started with Mrs. Rushton, and the basement of the store was just a little room with books on the shelves. It was a great beginning. 1967, they had renovations in the building on 3rd Street because, like I said, they had an apartment in the back originally. Apartments, libraries, not always the best combo. They needed more space to expand. So they renovated the basement ceiling, they renovated the inside, they moved their shelving around. We had couch donated. There's been a lot of donations. As far as that goes, the rug that I'm currently sitting above, a person heard me asking if there was any way I could fundraise to pay for a new carpet, and a community member came into the library with a check. So I must say that community support's always awesome. After Mrs. Rushton, we had in 1958 the 2nd librarian. So Mrs. Rushton wasn't a librarian for very long, and she was Lois Held. Healed. My apologies.
It's okay.
It's librarians weren't necessarily trained. They were doing it as a side job. Most of them had families. Husbands were working, so this was just something to fill their time that they really believed in and got going. Anne Donaldson was our 3rd librarian in 1963, and I don't have a lot of information on all of these librarians, but she was a librarian in 1967 when the renovations were done, and they had the grand reopening, and I have seen pictures from back then. They had the doors painted with polka dots. There was windows. They had an entranceway put in. They used to have a glass door, which they had later replaced with a steel door with just a window in the top for security reasons. The book drop was put in. It opened right into the library, which currently is frowned upon. In the old library, I did find people would throw their shoes in and come over to my house and ask, could I go back to work and let them get their shoes back? They'd think it was a joke with their friends. So book drops that open right into the library, not really a good idea, especially with a wide opening. And that book drop was big enough to throw a book bag into, a large one. So we fundraised when we got to the new library, and we do have an outdoor book drop right now, which prevents a lot of the issues that we had at the old one. It also doesn't freeze open in the winter, letting all the heat escape. Mrs. June Scott was our 4th librarian, and she's still a present library user. So she comes back every year, stops in and says hi. It's very nice to have somebody who's stayed a library supporter for all those years. She is not from the area currently, but still a user and still shows her appreciation. So library members, we tend to have long-term here. And we actually have some members who remember their first library card number. So I had patron number 2 come in and say, I want to borrow a book, my card number's 2. We don't use those anymore. We have updated with our automation system, and that was supported. Our first automation system was supported with funding from Doris McInnes. She left a bequest to the library. So that was the way that I was able to fulfill one of my goals. It was through a bequest, and she used the library, but I wouldn't have, she was not a heavy user, but she saw the value of it.
She was one of the people in this town, Doris McGinnis, who saw value in a lot of things and volunteered a lot, from the playground to the sports to the library. She certainly was generous and supported so many things. Likely education-wise, she would have thought of the library, I think. Yes.
Like I said, a lot of the supporters who come in and fund the library, they'll donate money for the couch, the carpeting, the automation system. A lot of the people who are funding those items aren't actually the heaviest users of the library. The heaviest users sometimes can be a different economic level, and they tend to donate a lot of stuff like the DVDs and things because they see the value in that for themselves. But it's amazing the support we get from people who just see the value of having a library available in the community. So June Scott left in 1969 from the library. She relocated with her husband, and from 1969 to 1972, June Scott was here before relocating. So in 1972, we had a new librarian, and that would be Betty Brill, our current museum director. And she moved it along. She saw the value in history. She did heavily into the buzz news, so people had a little bit of historical background on the community. She had books that she collected or curated for the collection to give people more of a sense of history, community history and background. So we still have a bunch of those ones in reference that will always be here, and it's thanks to her that started. So some of the books in the library are from before 1958, not too many, and some of them we've had to rebind. But Betty was a good instigator, getting things going, and history was a passion of hers and still is. She was here until 1983, and then we had Kay Jubenville. Now, Kay Jubenville was a long-time user, supporter, and she continued to be long after she retired. Kay Jubenville was a board member, started several years after she retired. For more than 20 years she was on our board. She volunteered at the library. She brought her grandkids, her kids, just did a lot of programming and continued to bring people in to volunteer with her, not just on her own. So Kay was here for quite the time.
I just remember Kay always being here for the Easter egg hunt too.
Yes.
She was always taking part in those things, supporting you with those things. She liked that.
But she didn't always want to be in the headlines. She liked to just get the work done.
Right.
Wasn't a glory hound, just get it done.
Yeah.
If you had a good idea, she'd support you. We had a really brief sixth librarian just before Kay and after Betty Brill, and she was very brief. I don't know how many months she was here. It was Mrs. Eppel.
Yeah.
So I don't have any information on her.
Except her son went to school with one of my kids, so I remember that name.
Yes,
Yeah.
but that's
and that's all.
That's all I have on her. Even pictures of previous librarians have been hard to find. The more modern ones, not a problem, but the past, it didn't seem like people took a lot of pictures in libraries at that time. So Kay was here. She was our 7th librarian, and she was here from 1983 to 1991. So she had a long tenure here. And when she retired, she stayed involved. And like I said, she had been primary in getting a lot of programming going. At the time, communications weren't done by computer. There's a lot of correspondence by memo, letters that we handwritten, very neat penmanship. So she got a lot of videos, films brought in, and they were all done with her letter writing campaigns. She got a typewriter brought in for the library, items like that, and funded. But again, she got, we have a few statues and things in the library. There was a lending collection at the time, Northwestern Regional Library System, and she got materials through that for display in the library. But it was all done through mail. At the time, when she retired, they hired a librarian, and they had also worked on, the board at the time had been working with her on I can't remember the words for it now. Pay equity. So they had revised their job descriptions and gone through a lot of that. And it was the first time the board had done that. That was a big thing in the 80s. When it was done, it took a lot of work. So that was another thing that she can be proud of accomplishing with the board. So they hired their 8th librarian, Carrie Matheson, and she was here from 1991 to 1997. Carrie was slightly bohemian. She, was really good with kids. She liked kids. She did a lot of the programming. So if you see pictures with her, she created puppets. We still have some of the decorations from Carrie's time hanging from the ceiling right now above us with the Halloween ghosts and the witch. We tend to recycle, I guess you'd call it, or upcycle. So we don't tend to throw a lot of stuff out if we can reuse it the year after. We try to be fiscally responsible. And Carrie moved on to a job in Thunder Bay. It was an advancement for her. So Tracy Laird was the librarian after her. And she was a professional librarian that was hired. She lasted about 1.5 to 2 years, and she got a new job in Thunder Bay. Again, Nipigon is a stepping stone for librarians in some ways. If you're a librarian by trade, it's a good place to get experience in all levels, because as a librarian here, you're doing the board meetings, you're doing budgeting, you're doing financials, payables, shipping, receiving, ordering, cataloging. You're it.
Okay, so we're going to continue as part 2 with Sumi about the libraries.
So I got hired in 1999. Tracy had taken another job and given a 2 weeks notice, so the board didn't have a lot of turnover time. There wasn't a lot of overlap. She did come back for a couple of weekends when she had time off from the job in Thunder Bay to help out. However, the board was scrambling to hire somebody, and at the time I was on the board, so I took a leave of absence since I had the training and applied, which was on par with everybody else. They have a schedule that they follow for hiring with the same interview questions for everybody and a rating scale, so they don't play favorites. I think one of the advantages that I had was the fact that I already had the training and lived in the community, so that did help. And I wasn't planning to leave the area. Since I started in Jellicoe, I haven't gone very far in the grand scheme of life. I've traveled the world, but not to live, so to speak. So I got hired on June, and this would be my 20th year. I'm actually the 10th librarian, or the 11th, depending on how you look at it. I took a year off for maternity leave, and Barbara Walker was hired. She was hired in 2001, overlapping to 2002. And when she was here, she did a major weed. She got some donations. She had a minnow race that she tried out to see as a fundraiser. We've had a number of successful fundraisers. The shelving campaign was one of the better ones because it did fund the shelving. We always tend to think ahead. So donations to the library, when people buy used books from us, book bags, stuff like that, money that we have goes into a reserve fund for the library. So we're always thinking ahead. We always have money set aside for projects. We try not to be playing catch up too much. So we are already working on a new photocopier fund. We've got that partially funded because we had to replace it last year. We try not to be in desperate straits begging the public at last minute.
But you did have you did take part like in the fishing festival.
Yes.
As a fundraiser a couple of times.
We have sold ice cream.
Right.
We had in the old library, we had a firing range in the basement for the cadets. It's not something that a lot of libraries can, it's not a natural partnership when you think of it to have a firing range in your library.
Explain a little bit more about that, Sumiye, then.
So the local cadet corps needed someplace to practice, and the library board decided, since our basement was not being used for collections and other items, that we would allow them to use it. It was long and skinny and made the perfect setup, and we were able to put the targets at the end. We're not talking hunting rifles at this stage, we're talking practice rifles. So it was a good place. We were able to contain the kids at one end with their instructor and have the one doing the shooting be in front of them with another instructor. So it was always monitored. But again, it's not a normal partnership when you think of things. We tend to think outside the box. So as fundraisers, we've sold scoopable ice cream from the library many years running. We only stopped when a business right downtown decided to start selling ice cream, because I try not to compete with local businesses. The community doesn't have enough disposable income for me to be competing with a business trying to earn a living. I'm tax funded. That's not fair to the community businesses to be in competition with them. So summer students tended to get a little more muscular in the one arm, and you could buy single scoops or double scoop ice creams. Again, not a natural partnership according to some people, but it worked for us. It brought people in that don't normally think of the library.
You're located on the main street for one thing, which is people passing by in the summertime.
Yep.
It was a perfect fit.
And we have the park right behind us. We still sell freezies. Those I can just leave in the freezer, and there's no major amount of work to freezies. They're easy. But we still have people coming in that remember that we sold ice cream years ago, and they'll still come in and say, "Can I buy a scoop?" And I'm like, "Well, you have to go next door now." So other fundraisers.
The other thing's not really, well, you have big, but the other activity I think that is really big, of course, is your Easter egg hunt. And you do have a bake sale along with that.
Yes, we started doing an Easter egg hunt, and I wanted to do it outside in the park. However, the weather has never really cooperated with that option, so we do it inside the library. And the first year we started, we had 1,400 Easter eggs in the library that at the time we spent a afternoon stuffing with wrapped candy with volunteers. So it was quite fun. However, we had to wash the eggs after we were done, and there was a lot of work involved with that. You can't hide that many eggs, and we were finding them for months afterwards, the ones the kids had missed. It's lots of fun, but it kind of decimates the library for a day. There's a lot of cleanup involved. And if you happen to sit on the couch and find they didn't actually pick up the last couple chocolates, it's not very fun. There was a lot of cleanup. So we've changed it up over the years. Now we put empty eggshells out, and every year
you
there's...
better say they're plastic.
Yes, we do have plastic empty eggshells out that are donated by the community members. They know we do the Easter egg hunt, so they'll drop off with plastic eggs that they buy after Easter to, make a donation to the library or Easter prizes for the next year. So what we do now is we have special Easter eggs that the kids have to find, and we don't tell them what they are, and if they find one of the special ones, they get a prize basket of Easter goodies. If they don't, they only get a treat bag full of Easter candies. So it's we average about 60 children per year for that, ages 0 to 8. We have tried a couple of treasure hunts, scavenger hunts for the older children. Not heavy use of those, but we will continue to try to involve them. And so we've done glass blowing in the library. Again, flames in libraries, not always what you would think of when you look at us, but it's something we had people asking about. So we try to accommodate requests. If somebody has an interest of something they'd like to learn, we try to accommodate where we can. One of the things that I'm proud of is the fact that we've been digitizing the newspapers. We're still looking for volunteers. We do have a couple of decades scanned that have not been uploaded to the site. And the reason it's taking so long is because if I sent them out to be done, the company would do it for free, but then it would cost the public every time they accessed them or printed them. By doing it ourselves, it's free for the public. They have full access and they can print them as they want. So it's a community service that the library has been working on.
But Sumi, you have so many programs. When I'm just even looking at the toys and the things that you have accumulated for the children's side of the library.
There's a few different things that not everybody thinks about when they think about libraries. So we lend chocolate molds. We lend knitting needles. We've lent fishing rods. We've got a audio player that we lend out. We had a DVD player we were lending out. We have a external DVD drive for a computer that we lend out. A floppy A drive that, believe it or not, somebody still borrows to use, which is the little floppy drives that have been out of, most people have gone away from those a long time ago, but we still have that available to lend. And people don't always associate the library with the chocolates or the knitting needles. It's not, we have DMC floss. So somebody ran out when they were doing a project, embroidery. They came and borrowed it because we have it for our programming. And it's something, again, we can let you use. It was donated to the library. It's something we have available. We have candle molds. We do lend out the glass bead kit. So we have the torch head. We have the cooling blankets. It's just when there's a need or a request for, we accommodate as much as budget and safety allows. So we have kits right now that we're sharing with other libraries. So if you're in one of our surrounding communities, we have children's backpacks. They have stories in them. They have sieves. They have binoculars. They're activity kits to get your kids outdoors. They have trail maps in them. And some of them have, they all have magnifying glasses and bug catchers. But some of them also have molds. So if you want like footprints for animal tracks, they're in that kit. So they're educational at the same time as being fun. So you can grab a kit, borrow it, take it out, have fun with your kids, go on a hike. We're just trying to get people out and active. Healthy communities is what the board's after. We have a GPS that we lend out for hiking. It's not a car GPS. It does have the back road maps installed on it, but it's meant for if you want to go hiking, you want to look up if you're interested in doing any of the waypoints that you're finding, any of the treasure boxes. That's all available.
And then, of course, I always think of your major activities that you have here for children, though. You're running programs all of the time, especially seasonal ones, Sumi. And then your health ones with the health unit. Mm-hmm. You have those as well.
So for about 5 or 6 years, the board's been interested in getting the library more involved in having healthy communities. We talked about blue zones at one of our board meetings, and the board member was very much into healthier communities. People have better mental health, physical health, they live longer, and the communities tend to be more active, more involved, more engaged. So we've done partnerships with the family health team and had children's program, adult programming. We did a Girl Talk program. We've partnered with the Township. We did a Biz Kids program. Some of the kids are still selling products that started out with the Biz Kids program. It was a business loan. You learned a little bit about marketing, a little bit about doing a business plan. The banker came in, so you could sign a little contract with them to get a few $20 or $40, whatever it was. I don't remember at this time, and then when you were done, you had to come back and report back to your banker and pay him back or explain why you had to default on your loan. So we've had some interesting partnerships along the way, and almost anybody in town has some kind of knowledge they can share, whether it's fly tying with Mr. Dupuy, or whether it's the banker coming in to do a program for people exiting high school on what's involved in credit, what affects your credit rating, what affects your mortgage if you're, as soon as you graduate university, how many credit cards you should or shouldn't have. People are always helpful and willing to share. You don't have to be a formal instructor to participate in the community. You just have to be willing to help somebody.
And the latest ones are sharing the authors, of course, sharing their information, because you're big on local authors.
Yes.
As well, Sumi.
We have a local history display, and by local, it's anybody who's current or former, and we have it separated out from the rest of the collection at this point. There's a lot of talent in our community, whether it's painting, whether it's sewing, whether it's singing, writing. There is just so many people in town that people don't know about. So the library is currently looking at partnering with the Edge Arts building, and we are working with other community organizations to get more involved. And whether we partner with them coming to the library or whether we go to them, we sometimes just provide computer services, availability to them to use a desk, to do their grant applications. There's different ways to partner. There's different ways to help out in the community.
What's your time? Oh, so then maybe explain a little bit about your computers, because you always have people at the computers, to me.
Computer use has really changed. When it first started, a lot of people were just gaming or new to searching on the internet. I find a lot of people now, we do provide Wi-Fi on a separate service from our wired computers that we have available. The Wi-Fi people can come to the library, use it outside the building or inside on their own devices. And I'm finding a lot of people in the last few years, they're coming to the library, they want to print tickets, they're doing banking, they're doing courses. I'm doing proctoring at the library. That's another service we offer. So proctoring exams for students. And some of the students are mature, some of them are high school. There's no rhyme or reason to who might need a service. But we are doing a lot of government forms at the library now. It's not just, I want to play a game or I want to be socially connected. There's a lot of different things. We have people coming in to use the Wi-Fi so they can talk to their grandkids because they don't have internet at home. We also have people, our e-book services or e-audio, so electronic services, Ancestry. We have a lot of items like that are also available. Not everybody knows about them, but I'm finding more people coming in to use them. So our circulation of physical items has decreased, but it's offset by our electronic items, so our overall circulation is still about the same. But when you look at what circulates in print, it's not the same. We used to have a heavy reference, more nonfiction was going out. Now, not as much. People are turning to the internet for that. So usage is changing slightly. Not necessarily where I would have thought of it, but it's something that, trends to watch.
Right. And one trend worries me is some of the schools getting rid of their libraries. I always think that's a very sad situation when I hear that they don't have a formal library anymore in a school. Mm-hmm. So it is fortunate that Nipigon has still such an active library.
Our users have changed. When I first started at the library, we were heavily used by the older adults. We had more foreign language materials.
Oh.
We had separate collections, like biographies were in a separate section. I have everything integrated now. And I noticed that our circulation, what I'm buying has changed. Now I'm getting more of our reference materials electronically due to price. People are doing language materials at home, not necessarily coming to borrow the language book anymore. And yet there is a trend for people to return to fiction reading more in print. So I have users that I only see when their library card, every 2 years it shuts down, you have to come back and renew it at the library. And some of the users that I've seen recently, I didn't realize, I'd forgotten they actually had cards because they're only using the electronic resources. So there's a trend there where you don't have to be in the building to still be a library patron or still be a supporter. So there's been slight changes. So I have invisible patrons now, which is a change. But we have heavy programming in literacy. We have book clubs. The Children's Book Club has a lot of members right now. We do programming for the adults. It's just changed. So if somebody has a suggestion, we're always open to programming based on suggestions or what we see a need for.
Okay.
And
I
that's
just
it.
think that Sumi, you provided an awful lot of information on the libraries and what they do, and I think that's good. That's part of Nipigon history. So thank you very much.
Thank you.